So we were talking about the fact that even in a very simple framework where only labor is considered as an input for production, so in a very simple framework in which we do not consider capital or capital accumulation, there are some phenomena that do emerge. And one of the phenomena that actually emerge even in a pure labor framework is the rate of interest, so the presence of debt and credit relations. There is a chapter in your 1981 book in which you deal with these issues. So could you tell us something about how the rate of interest does emerge even in a pure labor framework, and how financial relations emerge within your framework?
No, yes, it's true. A rate of interest may emerge even in a pure labor economy where for the simplicity's sake, we assume that the only input in any production process is direct labor. Now, it's true that then we go on to extend this process to production with capital and with many forms. But even if we start from an economic system let's say, of a pure labor in this Smithian conception as it was envisaged by Adam Smith 2 centuries ago, the appearance of a rate of interest may be considered at the very moment at which the end of the production process, which is the end of the pure labor emission of input, which produces at the end an output which comes out as the purpose of the whole production process. You see, the very moment at which the process of production, although it ends, gives rise to a series of relations in which the consumers decide when and how they make use of the fruit of their production, in the sense that they may postpone in time the actual consumption of the fruit of their labor, or to put it in another way, we may consider the end of the production process, which itself may be the end of the input of labor, as expressed by a certain income which has taken the form of purchasing power. That's really the problem. We can look at the end of the production process as the distribution not of goods but of purchasing power. Now, the very moment the consumers have purchasing power for their use, they may actually undertake a activity of deciding when actually to use the purchasing power they have, when in time give effect to their decision to consumption. Now, and at this stage, in terms of purchasing powers, they may have different preferences on when, in time, to convert the purchasing power into actual acquisition of goods and of consumption. Now, these preferences that are intertemporal may be different from one consumer to another. And if we consider a whole economic system in which there has been structural change and the structural distribution of purchasing power, call it purchasing power, then an activity which is in a sense financial activity may come into existence by which some consumers postpone their actual consumption, physical consumption, and the other consumers may anticipate their actual consumption by borrowing purchasing power from other consumers. Overall, these relations of debts and credits that may take place cancel out. They come to zero. Which is consistent with an economic system which has ended the production process in terms of full utilization of productive capacity. Productive capacity is only labor in this particular.
Full employment, let's say.
For this, there is full employment. Full employment must take place. But the actual consumption, single consumers may go beyond or stay below the purchasing power which is generated by the production process. Now, in this situation, the problem arises of which unit of which unit to adopt in order to evaluate the transfer or the anticipation of purchasing power through time. That is an extra problem with respect to the one of production. Now, if in the framework is in terms of pure labor, the obvious unit of measurement of this purchasing power which is transferred through time is labor. Is labor in the same way as labor is the unit of measure of the whole purchasing power, or national income, as we call it at the present. Now,
you said that overall these debt-credit relations cancel out. So overall their amount is
all
zero.
the debt and credit relation cancel out.
But
but the problem arises of how this purchasing power has a meaning through time. If the economic system is a full-fledged economic system in terms of its structure, in other words, in terms of not only the the overall equilibrium condition is satisfied in the sense that full employment and full utilization of purchasing power is concerned. In macroeconomic terms, really. This is the interesting thing, is that these macroeconomic conditions are fulfilled, must be fulfilled at a certain moment of time, point in time, as well as through times.
As you were saying before, in the aggregate, these relations cancel out, but actually the volume of such kind of financial transactions is potentially unbounded. So
Yes.
this volume of these transactions can grow up
Yes.
basically to infinity.
Yes, that's right. One is faced with the macroeconomic equilibrium condition that must be fulfilled at the end of each particular period. But then the size of these transactions are not bounded at all. The bounding condition is the general equilibrium condition at each particular point of time, taken the point of time coinciding with the end of the production process. But the total amount of the transactions may go to infinity,
Which is somehow what is
provided that the equilibrium condition is satisfied.
Which is somehow what is happening now. I mean, the financial transactions are growing.
May go on to infinity. I mean, may go on as long as the overall macroeconomic condition can be kept satisfied. But there is no bound. Really, it may.
So you envisage some problem in this situation of enormous financialization. I
Yes,
think you
that's
addressed
right.
this issue has been addressed by you in.
This is strikingly in contrast with the physical. You see, with the physical overall condition, which means full employment for all at each particular point of time. That is physical. There is this striking comparison between what is physically determined and what is unbounded.
So let's say before going deeper into the issue of financialization, I would ask you whether you agree with me that there are two conclusions that one can draw from this in comparison to what neoclassical theory normally states. The first one is that a rate of interest actually arises independently of the rate of profit.
Yes, I have not described in detail the way in which the rate of interest is implicit into this framework. Yes, but this is one effect.
And the second one is, I think, connected to the first one. The issue is that normally neoclassical economics describe the rate of interest as a sort of remuneration for postponing consumption, so for the sacrifice of not consuming in a certain period but postponing it. While in your framework it seems to me that would be somehow the definition of a rate of interest, while the rate of profit is something entirely different. So this is another probably confusion which is made by neoclassical economics.
Well, that's true, yes.
So could you
yes, I mean, this is another aspect of this framework, which again would have to be specified. and it's interesting. The interesting thing is that the physical numeraire, the physical unit, in both cases is always labor. It's a pure labor model in which the labor unit, adjusted, by the way, would have to be specified, with the growth of productivity through time, because the further ahead the consumption is being postponed, the higher will be, meanwhile, the growth of productivity, and that for consistency of the whole model would have to be added to the fulfillment of the financial obligation, so that there is inside the whole model an implicit rate of interest which is itself based on the same unit of measurement, which is labor, quantity of labor.
So this does emerge from your, let's say, fundamental stage of analysis, which allows you to single out what you call the natural rate of interest.
Yes.
But from an institutional point of view, what do you think of this? I mean, you have been sometimes commenting on the Modigliani-Miller theorem and how neoclassical mainstream theory, traditional theory, with its own theoretical elaborations actually produced also some, I mean, somehow I think that this phenomenon of financialization, which actually somehow produced the crisis in which we currently are, is connected to the way in which economic theory normally deals with the issue or the financial issues. So could you comment a bit on the effect, of the practical effect of Modigliani-Miller theorem? So do you agree with that theorem? What do you think about it? What do you think has the consequences of taking it for granted was on the financial system?
I think we are taking here a further step.
Yeah.
You see, the Modigliani-Miller theorem is already inserted into an economic system in which there are capital goods.
Mm-hmm.
You see? And the assumption is that whether the capital goods are the result of investment processes inside the corporation or are the effect of borrowing purchasing power from outside have no effect on the overall operation, and but this is based on a certain framework of behavior of call them businessmen and consumers who have a perfect knowledge of all the relations and of all changes in expectations and technology, which is a much wider framework to be supposed in order to fulfill these assumptions. It may simply be compared with the more traditional view of investment being carried out by saving, in a capitalist economy where the the distribution of dividends or the internal use of these of the profits are I mean, the choice between the two types of finance is immaterial. I mean, is always known to everybody, to the people who make decision about investment, as well as people who have bought the shares and expect dividends from the firm. It's a step further from the pure labor.
But in your book, you generalized actually. I mean, what you say is a rate of interest and a whole set of debt-credit relations emerge even in a pure labor economy. But it is straightforward to extend this conclusion to the case in which capital goods actually exist. And so in that case, what you single out as capital accumulation condition, that is, in order to have full employment and full utilization of capacity through time, is that profits are then used for investment. And so somehow translating this into institutional terms would be like saying that, okay, it's important that profits are then followed by investment, physical investment in new machines and expansion of productive capacity, while this neoclassical view following from, let's say, Modigliani-Miller actually points towards the opposite direction. So instead of using profits for investment in physical capital, profits are just distributed to stock owners, and this somehow created the financial issues we are facing. Do you agree? Do you think it's too superficial an interpretation? Could you elaborate a bit on this?
I think it's, the way to develop the model is more complicated.
Of course.
It's not whether you agree or not. The Modigliani-Miller framework have been developed in terms of rational behavior, both of shareholders and of decision makers. You see, everybody knows what everybody else think and what everybody else prefer, and the application or of the traditional model then is perfectly satisfied. Now in any setup, institutional setup we know of, this can never be. These assumptions can never be satisfied, really. So there are these further complications. The use of the pure labor economy model is useful to see the opposition between the case in which investment are required to achieve the general equilibrium, to fulfill the general equilibrium that is in the sense of full employment condition, and the case which refers to the multiplication of the financialization of the economy, which is completely open, really, to be pursued, even in the case of a pure labor economy, really. It's in order to compare these two situations and in order to underline the characteristic of a production system where, when the full employment condition is required in order to have full employment, in a sense, and the conditions in which this is not, this doesn't come into the decisions at all. All the multiplications of the intertemporal debt and credits are completely free, which can go on in whatever way one likes, really. So it's in order to stress the difference between what is constrained by the physical process of production and what is not constrained by any external means except by the institutions, if you like, which is what they should do.
So which is the role of institutions, in your opinion, in this framework? What you say the institutions should, since these financial transactions are potentially unbounded, should it be the role of, one of the possible roles of the institutions should be that of trying to bound the volume of this?
Well, I think the binding of these financial institutions is something which has to be brought in at a certain point. Well, I mean, and the institution, by bringing it in, but bringing this constraint in, must also specify how it is brought in and how one can stop letting this unbound possibility go on and on and on. They'll have to specify the binding constraints, and this is definitely a task that comes from the institutions. While when we look at the investments and the macroeconomic condition for full employment, the binding constraint is there, and it is physical. When we go over to the financialization of this, there is no constraint. It will have to be brought in, and that will be an institutional task.
So while in the first case, talking about physical investment, the task of the institutions is, we have a condition, we know that that condition is the one we should fulfill. We have to find a way to fulfill it. In the second case, so as to what concerns financial relations, the role of the institutions is that of setting up the conditions. So
that's right. And evaluating what the conditions are more appropriate to the type of institution or setup that you have at the particular moment of time. Yes, it really is an opening up of institutional analysis, in a sense. It certainly takes place within the financial setup, and that is something which doesn't come out from the type of economic theory we have at present. There is a lot. Well, I mean, my purpose was to show how this present crisis is actually uncovering a horizon of new institutional tasks that we have not considered in the past, and we better begin to consider now, really.
And this crisis, and also you stressed in some quite recent interventions you made in different contexts. So this crisis has a lot to do, of course, with the real economy, but also with the interaction between real economy and financial issues.
Yes, indeed.
So what do you think about the explosion of this financial bubble and the
Well, I
way
don't
in
think,
which
don't want to think about
don't
it.
want to think about it.
Let's hope we behave a little bit more responsibly.
The fact that actually financial transactions
Pile up.
grew enormously in
Yes.
the last years
Yes.
also had a set of consequences on income distribution, because whereas in a in a pure labor framework in which financial transactions take place only for the sake of postponing or anticipating consumption, there is a clear and straightforward way of intending how these transactions should be remunerated. In the actual, what actually happened in the last years is that someone actually got remunerated for these transactions, but someone didn't. So somehow we had that this enormous growth of the volume of financial transactions actually affected a lot the issue of income distribution. So how do you see the interaction between this financialization of the economy and the issue of income distribution? Do you think there are some interactions, and if so, how?
I can see the rising of situation of that type. I don't think I don't think the pure labor model will. The pure labor model may give you a background on which to expand and analyze this situation. It doesn't give you the way to solve them.
No, of course.
It gives you a background on which to put this blowing up of financial situation. You have to do something else. I mean, we have to look into the character of these financializations and the way in which they are developed in order to draw something. I mean, you have a background which I think is helpful. What you have to put on the top of it, that is something else. You have to specify what we are going to.
But in your book, once you generalize the issue of the rate of interest to a fully fledged economic system with capital accumulation and everything, however, the conclusion is that a natural rate of interest would have the task of transferring purchasing power through time according to the quantity of labor, which is actually, transferring purchasing power is like transferring labor. So a natural rate of interest should be connected to labor productivity, because labor productivity should be somehow the unit of measurement of purchasing power through time, which is of course not what is actually happening in the present situation. So you have a framework to, let's say, state what the role of a rate of interest should be, and so what a natural rate of interest should be, and comparing the result of this theoretical exercise, so the result of your theoretical conclusions, to what is actually taking place in the real world right now, you see that there's much room for institutional intervention in order to try to fix something which is actually probably a problem. So the way in which actually financial issues are treated within the present institutional setup goes a lot far away from what you envisage as the role of finance and the role of a rate of interest. So what do you think about the enormous bifurcation between what should be, or what we think things should work, and how they are actually working within the present situation?
I can't give an answer to this. I mean, it depends on what happens out. What I can say something about is about the background. I can't say anything, or I have to. I leave it to people who use that background to say anything about what one superimpose on it. And what one superimpose on it may be very different in various situations. That's a field of research, really, for institutional economics rather than which institutional economics that has a basis on on the natural system. I mean, however and whatever in whatever way you want to use it.
So maybe you could just give us a couple of hints about what exactly the distinction between the fundamental stage of the analysis and the institutional stage of analysis is, because all the discussion we're having right now is deeply rooted into your distinction between these two levels of analysis. So it might be useful to elaborate a bit more on what actually this distinction is.
Well, if you
a definition of the two stages of the analysis.
If you can elaborate it. Well, I mean, what I give is the background of a pure labor economy, which is useful, even if used in those simple terms. What you put on top of it from the institutional setup of society is something else. I mean, you'll have to specify it. The production, pure labor background will be useful in many ways. I mean, or it may not be useful at all if the type of institutional complication that you have developed are particular, I don't know, I mean, unforeseen.
No, but my question was more relating to, could you explain us how would you define the fundamental stage of the analysis, and how would you define the institutional one? So what you called in your latest book the separation theorem. Could you explain us the difference between the separation between the two stages of the analysis?
Well,
because this is very clear to you, but to many people this is not clear.
Certainly, one should be able to fix the separation, where the limit of the separation is. What is beyond the separation, I don't think I have intention to investigate at present, at least.
But you provide a definition of what is. I mean, in your work, you provide a definition of what is, in your view, the fundamental stage of the analysis.
Well, it should, yes. If I succeed in defining it completely, it should provide the limits of the background.